Hey everyone, welcome back. This week's video we're going to show you how to make 4 different dishes that will impress your friends out of one single chicken and on a budget. So let's start cooking. First we're going to debone the chicken. For that we start to cut the spine out at first. If you have some poultry scissors, I would recommend using those, otherwise it works with a sharp knife. Just be careful that you don't cut yourself. You can see here it's a little bit of a pain to get it cut out. For that we're going to make one long cut on each side of the spine, and you are able to take the spine out after that, as you can see right here. Put it aside, we'll need that later for our chicken stock. Now we flip the chicken open and just flip it one more time, similar in the way you would usually spatchcock a chicken. Next we're going to cut out the chicken legs, which should be fairly simple. There should only be a hole together with a flap of skin by now. So just do that cut as you can see right here, repeat it on the other side, and you will have your separated chicken legs. For now we're going to put them aside, and we're going to separate the drumstick and the thigh later on. Next we're going to cut out the wings. You will see in a second that I struggled a little bit with that. Looking back, I would recommend that you feel with your fingers first to find the joint, and then just do one cut with the knife and you should be able to separate it. Now we have one last part left, which are the chicken breasts. For that, just cut in the middle and you have 2 breasts. We'll have to debone them later on, but for now just make one cut in the middle and separate them. One last thing we have to do before we debone the breast, we have to remove the chicken tender. For that, just flip it open and cut along the tissue there. Make like 1 or 2 cuts and you should be able to lift out the chicken tender. Put them aside, we're gonna need them later. And now we're going to remove the bone from the chicken breast. For that, just make one long cut around the underside, around the bone, and then make one other cut as you can see right here. It's okay if you have some meat left, it helps us to get some more flavor to the broth later on. Put it aside and do the same with the other breast. Now we're going to remove the drumstick from the thigh in a similar way as we did that earlier. Just feel it and move the drumstick around a little bit to make sure that you really find the joint, and then just use your knife and do one cut. Just break it through and you should be able to separate them fairly easy. After you have done the cut where you separate the joints, I like to flip the chicken and just make a nice cut around the skin so you have a nice looking drumstick later on, as you can see right here. Now we have one more piece left before we can start with our chicken broth, and that's the chicken thighs. For that we first cut up that bigger bone on the upper side, as you can see here. Make one large cut and then just break the joint open and then flip it around, do one more cut, and you're able to separate that. Put it aside, we're going to use that for the broth, and now we're going to remove that one small bone inside the thigh. For that, make a few shallow cuts around the bone left and right, and then you can slowly fold it open and flip it up, and then carefully cut down from the top down on the bone, and you should be able to get the bone out after a few cuts. And just be careful and gently cut down a few times until the bone separates from the meat, as you can see here. Put all of the bones and the tissue that's left into the bowl that we have for our stock later on. I decided to take off the skin as well and add it into the broth. If you would like to roast or grill the thighs, I would leave it on. Can make some nice crispy skin out of it. And that's how we debone the chicken. And let's move on with our broth. For our broth, we try to keep it pretty simple. We're going to use our pressure cooker for it and use half an onion. We're just going to peel it. And we're also going to use around 1 gram of whole black peppercorns and 2 or 3 starts of spring onions. Because we're just going to use those onions for flavoring, we can just cut them into 3 bigger pieces, put them into the pot, and repeat that pretty much with the spring onions as well. Cut off the front part and then just cut them into probably 1 to 2 inch long pieces, and then we're gonna put them into the pot as well. One thing you can do though is taking off the upper greener part, which is not that great, and then just the rest, like I said, in 1 to 2 inch slices. Now we're gonna add our 1 gram of black peppercorns and then just add them into the pot and add the chicken, and make sure to cover all of it with water until probably the max amount you can use in your pot. It should say on the side somewhere. If you don't have a pressure cooker, you can also use a normal pot. Just let it boil for probably a few hours until you have some nice flavor. If you have a pressure cooker, add the pot in there now and set it to 1 hour on high temperature and you should be good to go. Now we're going to marinate our drumsticks, tenders and wings that we're going to bake later. For that we're going to use half a tablespoon of paprika. If you have smoked paprika, use that. Half a tablespoon of onion powder, half a tablespoon of kosher salt or Himalayan salt we use here, and around half a teaspoon of black pepper as well. Make sure you have freshly ground black pepper, which helps with the flavor a lot. Now we're going to tiny whisk all of this together, and we're going to season all of our pieces. I know I said earlier that we used the chicken tenders as well. We forgot them here, but we did the same thing later on off camera. For the drumsticks, peel the skin back and make sure you season the meat underneath so the flavor will actually go inside the drumstick and not just stick outside the skin. And also marinate the skin a little bit, which helps. The salt helps to dry it and get a more crispier skin. And then after we're done, we're gonna put them into the fridge until we're ready to bake them. Next is probably the most fun part of this whole recipe. We're gonna make our own minced chicken. For that we use the 2 chicken breasts that we had, and you will use your strongest knife. And if you have 2 cleavers, perfect, but it also works if you have a chef knife and a cleaver or 2 chef's knife. It's all good. Just make sure they are actually sharpened. So use one of your sharp knives and butterfly the chicken breast. For that, just make one cut length, like probably half thickness of the chicken, and then just flip it around. That helps to have a less thick chicken, and it helps us to break the meat apart easier when we actually try to make the minced beef meat chicken. There we go. If I do this, I like to use the back part of the knife first, just to break the tissue apart before actually cutting the chicken. Just give it like a few rounds and make sure everything is broken apart before flipping the knife and start to actually cut the chicken. Now this is also the moment where you get out your second knife and start to get rid of all your aggressions you have accumulated through your week, and just start to hit the chicken, put it back together on a pile, and just repeat that until you have a consistency that looks like ground chicken that you usually buy at the store. Maybe a little bit thicker, but somewhere around there. And you can see we all are getting hungry and excited for our burgers soon. Now, as soon as we achieve the consistency that we were looking for, as you can see right here, it's sticking together and we still have some small tiny pieces, which is great. We are ready to season our burger patties. Also make sure you repeat this step for both of the chicken breasts and not just one of them. Now, for the seasoning, we decided to use the leftover half white onion and 2 cloves of garlic, as well as salt and pepper. For the onions, if you have the time, would highly recommend to saute it real quick, but we're kind of in a time crunch here, so we decided not to do that. So first, cut the onion into small little cubes. Just really small, please, because you don't want to have big pieces of onion in your burger. I like to go through the cut onions with my knife a few times just to assure I really have small thin pieces, you can see here. Now we use a garlic press to crunch our 2 cloves of garlic and do the same thing there. Just go through it with the knife again, just to make sure everything is broken up nice and thoroughly. Now we're going to use probably half a tablespoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of black pepper, and just mix all of it together with your hands. And then if you want to see how it tastes, I recommend just to use a small piece and grill it real quick on your pan, or just fry it real quick so you have a better understanding on how the final burger will taste. As you can see, this is quite a messy job, so if you have any gloves, I recommend using those. As soon as all the seasoning is spread out through the meat evenly, we are ready to put it in the fridge and let it marinate for a little bit. Make sure to cover it with plastic wrap though. Now we're going to prepare all of our veggies that we will need for pretty much all the dishes we will make. First, we have a cucumber that we peeled and washed, and we're gonna just cut it into small stripes, you can see right here. And we will also cut the carrots that we also cut into small stripes, and both of them will be used as a filling for the spring roll. After we're done with that, we're gonna cut the lettuce as well. I would recommend to use green leaf lettuce. Unfortunately, we couldn't get any, so we had to use the one you can see here, and just cut the back part out though, so it's easier to bend the lettuce, which helps us to later on roll the spring rolls. Also keep in mind we will need some lettuce for the burger, so cut a little more. We will also use some mint leaves for the spring rolls, so just peel them off and we have all the veggies prepared we will need for the spring rolls and the burgers. Now we need a baking tray covered in aluminum foil, and we're gonna place all of our marinated chicken parts, so the wings, the drumsticks and the tenders, on top of it, as well as the unseasoned chicken thighs. At this point we realized that we forgot to get the salt and pepper, so we asked the person behind the camera if we could please get some salt and pepper. Sprinkled some on there and they're ready to go into the oven for probably somewhere around 20 to 30 minutes by 400 degrees Fahrenheit or 200 degrees Celsius until they're nice crispy, and reached 165 Fahrenheit or 73 degrees Celsius internally. Now we're coming closer to the home stretch and we're gonna prepare our peanut sauce for the spring rolls. For that we will use 30 grams or 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar, 30 grams or 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, 42 grams or 2 tablespoons of honey, 1 tablespoon or 14 grams of sesame oil, and 1/3 of a cup or 85 grams of creamy peanut butter. And you can also add 1 or 2 tablespoons of water just to make the whole mixture more liquidy and nicer to dip. We're gonna mix all of that together in a bowl and give it a good whisk with our tiny whisk, and we're all set. And we're finally ready to prepare our burger patties. For that we use our minced chicken and divide it into 8 equal pieces, which is enough for 4 patties. 8 because we decided to add some manchego cheese in the middle of the patty. So if you bite in it or you cut it open, you have this nice cheese flowing out and it just tastes really, really great. For your cheese choice, you can pretty much use whatever you want to. I think cheddar is also a good alternative, or pretty much any cheese you like. You can also mix and match, or literally whatever you feel like it. Just make sure that you have something that melts pretty easy. I also recommend making your hands wet because minced chicken is pretty sticky and it makes it almost impossible to form a patty if your hands are really dry. Now, the idea is that we pretty much make 2 patties for each burger and then put the cheese in the middle of it, fold them together and make sure you seal the sides pretty well. And then we put it in the fridge for like 15 minutes just to really solidify again. Make sure that the cheese will not run out. If you have something like a tart ring or something to form the patty, you can do that. I couldn't find mine, so I did it by hand and it worked pretty well as well. Now you have to repeat this step 3 more times, and I also recommend to put some plastic foil underneath the patty before you put them in the fridge. Now it's time for our spring rolls. So our chicken thighs should be ready now, so we cut them into small, really thin slices, and we will also need the veggies we prepared earlier, and we need our spring roll wrappers that you can get in most supermarkets now. Now for the chicken, I rather cut it a little bit smaller because it makes it easier to roll the actual spring roll later on. Now in order to roll the spring roll, we have to wetten our wrapper. So just use some lukewarm water, dip the wrapper in there. Don't force it, because if you put too much force on it, it will break, and it makes it a lot harder to actually roll the spring roll. Now you have to be a little careful. The spring roll will probably stick on your work surface, but yeah, now we're going to add all of our ingredients, the cucumbers, the carrots, as well as the lettuce and the mint. I recommend that you add those veggies first and then you add the chicken later, so it helps, it makes it a little bit better on rolling and it sticks less. Now for the actual rolling part, this is pretty similar to how to roll a burrito. You fold in the left and the right side first, then you try to hold all of it together, fold over the side from the top down, and then try to press all of it together and make it as tight as possible, and then just roll it together and you have your own homemade spring roll. And finally, we're gonna do some real cooking here. So we get out our cast iron and we're gonna split our burger buns in half, add some butter to the cast iron, and we just going to toast our buns to make sure they have some nice crisp to it when we actually bite into. Now when you do this, you have to make sure that your pan is not too hot. I would recommend the medium-high heat. Mine was almost too hot and the burger buns got a little dark and the butter almost burned. So be careful, not too hot, and just let them sit there until they're nice golden brown and you're all set. Now we're ready to grill our patty. For that, just make sure your pan is really hot and you also add some oil to it. Now you place the patty on it, make sure that it really gets a good sear on each side, and we cook it for probably somewhere around 7 minutes each side. And yeah, if you have a thermometer, I would definitely suggest to check the internal temperature to make sure we reach the 165 Fahrenheit. And now with some movie magic, we have our burger that's completely ready, that looks delicious. And just assemble a burger. And now you're probably saying, oh my god, where's the sauce? I know, we didn't add it on purpose though, because the burger itself with the homemade minced chicken was pretty juicy, especially with the cheese inside. So we added just some lettuce on top and decided that is good enough, and it tasted amazing. If you want to though, feel free to add something. By now our broth should be ready, and we're gonna season it with 2 tablespoons or 30 grams of white vinegar, 1.5 tablespoons or 19 grams of sugar. Then we're gonna add half a teaspoon or 3 grams of fine sea salt. At that moment I realized I forgot the salt, so I got some salt as well. And we're also gonna add some white pepper, but that's literally up to you how you like it. Just maybe half a teaspoon and just add it in there. So our inspiration for this dish was a cold Korean beef broth. We ended up eating the broth hot as we filmed the video, but I ate it cold the other day and it worked really well. We garnished it with some spring onions and also added some pear, and that's it. That's our homemade broth. And now we're done with all of our dishes. Make sure to get the wings out of the oven. Unfortunately, we forgot to record that, but yeah, that's it. We have some oven baked drumsticks, we have spring rolls with peanut sauce, we have an amazing cheese filled burger, and we have a healthy chicken broth. And all of this out of one chicken and basic ingredients. So if you want to surprise your friends, make this dish, and it doesn't take you that much time. It took us from start to end less than 3 hours. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and more will be coming soon. So just hit subscribe and check out all of our other videos in the meantime.